Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. You know, lately it seems like everyone's been talking about those weird drone sightings over New Jersey. It's kind of like you're living in an X-Files episode, right? Silent drones in the night sky. Nobody knows where they're coming from. And the internet is going crazy with theories. We've got everything from secret government experiments to, the return of Project Blue Beam. But before we get too deep into all the conspiracy stuff, I think it's important to, take a step back and look at what we actually know. What are the facts about these drone sightings? So we've been doing a lot of research, news reports, official statements, that kind of thing. And here's what we've been able to piece together so far. These sightings, they started popping up back in mid-November 2024. Most of them seem to be concentrated in New Jersey. But there have been a few reports coming in from neighboring states as well. And the descriptions that people are giving, they're all pretty similar. We're talking about large drones, completely silent, operating, under the cover of darkness. These aren't your average, toy drones that people fly around for fun. This is something else entirely. And here's the really crazy part. Even though the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security have been investigating, there are still no answers. Nobody has come forward to claim responsibility for these drones. And their purpose is still a total mystery. Now, of course, government officials have been trying to reassure everybody, saying there's no threat to national security. And they say there's no evidence of any foreign involvement. But, that hasn't really calmed people down. People are still looking up at the sky and wondering what's going on. It's definitely a pretty unsettling situation. So if it's not aliens and it's not some foreign government, what are we left with? Could this be a Psyop, psychological operation? Now, before you start thinking we've gone completely off the rails here, let's just take a second to think about what that term actually means.
So a psyop, basically it's a way to influence people. You're trying to influence how they think, how they feel, and ultimately how they behave. And you're doing this to achieve some specific goal, Think about things like propaganda posters or radio broadcasts that were used during wars. Those are classic examples of psyops in action.
Yeah, exactly. So we're talking about a deliberate attempt to kind of shape public opinion and behavior. But could the U.S. government really be using these drone sightings to try and influence its own citizens? I mean, that's a pretty big claim.
Yeah.
And we're not saying that's definitely what's happening here. But for the sake of this deep dive, let's just explore some possible reasons why a government might use drones in a psyop. We're not saying it's true, but let's just see what the possibilities are. So in our research, we found 6 potential objectives. And they're actually really interesting to think about. The first one on the list is something called testing public reaction.
So imagine this. The government stages these unexplained drone flights. And then they just watch. They watch how the public reacts to this strange, unknown thing in the sky. How quickly does panic start to spread? How do people try to find information? How do they respond to instructions from officials? It's like a giant social experiment, a way to understand how people behave in a crisis.
That's kind of like a giant dress rehearsal for a real emergency, but with real people.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's the first objective, testing public reaction. Okay, moving on to the next one on our list.
Yeah.
We've got distraction. I think we've all seen this happen before. Some big news story comes out. Everybody's outraged. They want answers. Right. And then suddenly, boom, something else happens. Maybe it's a celebrity scandal or some crazy viral video. And everybody forgets about the original issue. It's like magic.
Right. It's like a magician's trick. A really good distraction can pull your attention away from something important. And in this case, something like these mysterious drone sightings, well, it could be a way to distract people from other things that are going on. Things that maybe the government doesn't want us to focus on. Like political problems, economic issues, you name it.
Yeah, it really makes you think, doesn't it? Like how much of what we see and hear is actually designed to distract us.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on to the third objective. This one is called testing surveillance technologies.
So these days, technology is advancing so quickly, it's changing all the time. And it's not hard to imagine that governments are looking for ways to test out their new surveillance tools. See how they work in real-life situations. And these drone flights, well, they could be a perfect opportunity to do just that. They could be testing out new types of drones, seeing how well they can operate without being detected, and of course, how much information they can gather.
Yeah, it's almost like a beta test for spy technology.
Wow.
But instead of using a small group of testers, they're using an entire state. And this raises some really important questions about privacy.
Yep.
Like, do we really want to be constantly monitored, even if it's in the name of national security?
Yeah.
Okay. So the fourth objective we found is called psychological conditioning.
And this is the idea that if you're exposed to something over and over again, even if it's something that makes you uncomfortable at first, you eventually get used to it. Think about security cameras, They used to be really rare, but now they're everywhere. We barely even notice them anymore.
It's true. I mean, I will always even think about them most of the time.
Yeah.
So you're saying that by constantly exposing people to these unexplained drones, the government could be trying to make us more comfortable with the idea of being watched all the time.
Exactly. It's like a slow and subtle way to change people's attitudes about surveillance.
It's kind of creaky when you think about it. Okay. We've got 2 more objectives to talk about. Number 5 is called evaluating information dissemination.
And this one is all about understanding how information spreads, especially in today's world where everyone is connected online. So, by monitoring how rumors and theories about these drones are spreading, the government could be learning a lot about how to control information in the future. They can see what kinds of stories go viral, what people believe, and how to maybe counter misinformation or even shape public opinion.
Wow. So it's like they're using this whole situation as a giant experiment in information warfare.
Pretty much, yeah. And the things they learn from this could be really valuable for anyone who wants to influence how people think.
It's kind of scary when you think about how easily we can be manipulated. Okay, so the last objective on our list is maybe the most interesting one. It's called countering foreign influence.
So think of it this way, like a game of chess. You're not just focused on your own moves, you're also trying to figure out what your opponent is going to do. And in this case, the opponent could be a foreign government or a foreign media outlet. By watching how they react to these drone sightings, the U.S. government could be learning a lot. Are they trying to spread false information? Are they trying to take advantage of the situation? Or are they just watching closely like we are? It's all about gathering intelligence and trying to stay one step ahead.
Wow. It's like a real-life spy movie. And, speaking of things that make you feel a little uneasy, we have to talk about how the public is reacting to all of this. It's not surprising that with so many unanswered questions, people are coming up with all sorts of theories. One theory that's been getting a lot of attention is this idea called Project Bluebeam. Basically, it's the idea that the government is planning to stage a fake alien invasion, as a way to take control. Sounds pretty crazy, right? But there are people like Alex Jones and Charlie Kirk who have been talking about these drone sightings and connecting them to Project Bluebeam. And that's given the theory a whole new life, especially among people who are already suspicious of the government. Now, we're not saying whether they're right or wrong, but it's clear that these drone sightings have tapped into something, a fear of being manipulated, a fear of hidden agendas. And honestly, who can blame people for feeling that way? We're constantly bombarded with information these days. It's hard to know what to believe. So where does all of this leave us? We've got these unexplained drone sightings, a whole bunch of questions that nobody seems to have the answers to, and we've got a lot of possible explanations. Some of them are more believable than others.
But what's really interesting to me is that no matter what the real reason for these drones is, the whole situation tells us a lot about the things that people are worried about today. In a world where technology is changing so fast and there's so much information flying around, people are worried about being watched. They're worried about who's controlling the information we see, and they're worried about whether they can trust their government.
It's true. I mean, it's hard not to feel a little bit paranoid sometimes. So what can we do about it?
Well, I think the first step is to just be aware of these issues, Think critically about the information you're seeing and hearing, and don't be afraid to ask questions.
That's great advice. Well, we hope you found this deep dive informative
Yeah.
and maybe even a little bit thought-provoking. If you enjoyed this episode and you want to hear more discussions like this, be sure to subscribe to our show so you don't miss out on our next deep dive. Thanks for listening.